Hello, I'm Deval Sangvi, and this is No Cost Extension. I'm really, really excited to have an old friend of mine, Vishal Talreja, join the podcast today. We've known each other, I think, for 23 or 24 years. And we've been, yeah, sort of, I guess, bedfellows in sort of our own journeys and sort of leading organizations, being part of the sector. And as always, Vishal's doing new and innovative things. And so I think today is just a great conversation with him. Welcome, Vishal.
Thank you, Deval. It's a huge honor. And of course, I can't wait to relive some of the memories we've had together.
Exactly. I think that's the goal, I feel. That's why I shaved as well, so I can pretend that I'm young, like when we first met. Yeah, and I guess on that note, I think it would be great for the listeners to hear about when we first met. And if you don't mind, sort of, if you remember some of those aspects or some of those conversations, I think that would be fantastic. And where you were in your life at the time.
So it was 1999. I finished college and I started my first job at Xerox as a salesperson. And when I was there, I also got a chance to go on an exchange program to Finland, a student exchange program through ISEC, which is an international student organization. I was the first kid in the family going abroad, so I thought, why not? Let's take the opportunity. The 3 months in Finland were a game changer for me because it was the first time I got a chance to think about myself and my life and my future and whether there needs to be a purpose in my life, and if yes, what. I started talking to a lot of students in university there, and one of the things that came up was the idea of dignity. Finland works on a strong social welfare economy system. So at the university itself, you would have people who were working as bartenders or who were security guards and software engineers who were also studying all together. And because education is completely paid for, you could do that. So I made friends with someone who was a bartender, someone who was a doorman at a five-star hotel, a software engineer at Nokia. But all of them carried equal amount of pride about who they were and the life choices they made. And I said, I could never do that back in India. I started thinking about my own childhood and realized that I grew up in a very strong caste and class driven household. And because of which, I started believing that differences in society are normal. I used to keep a diary when I was there. So I wrote in my diary that I want to go back to India and change the way we look at dignity, not realizing that Finland is 5 million people, a really small country, and India is a billion and more. But that's the power of being 21. So came back and started talking about this. And there was another friend who introduced me to Brinda Jacob, who was starting something around doing something for kids who are in need, kids who are struggling in care homes. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I joined hands with Brinda and 10 other people. Most of us all just out of college in our first jobs and careers, still figuring out life. But all of us had this sense that we wanted to give back to the community in some way. So Ḓream-A-Dream was born in November 1999. And we ran it as a voluntary organization. None of us believed we wanted to build up an organization. We didn't know how to do that. None of us came from a social sector background. And it was around that time, in June 2000, I got a job offer in Mumbai. A friend of mine was starting an investment bank and he wanted me to join him. So I moved to Mumbai. But when I moved, I said I wanted to continue my volunteering journey. While Ðream-A-Dream was setting its foundations here, Bangalore, I wanted to continue my journey. But I moved to Mumbai in June 2000. And while I was looking for opportunities, I came across an article in the Economic Times, which was an interview with you.
They clearly didn't know what they were doing back then to be interviewing me.
I think you were working with an investment bank or a venture capital firm, but you had also started thinking about moving to the social sector. So I was very inspired by that article, and I found your email and I wrote to you, and you introduced me to Magic Bus. And we hadn't been met then, just over email. And I became one of the early volunteers of Magic Bus, taking street kids onto camps. But I think we met maybe a year after that at a Magic Bus event. I don't remember very well, but that relationship started really there.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I don't remember the article at all, but I remember us meeting at the camps, and the goal was to take children who lived on either the streets or in the slums of Mumbai, somewhere close by, to enable them to enjoy nature and meet other children from across Mumbai. And I think it was in Matharan, which is about a 2.5 hour train journey from Mumbai. For those people who don't know, Matharan is one of the few hill stations in India that still don't allow cars. And I just remember, sort of after the kids went to sleep, there were a few of us volunteers sitting around a campfire. And I think that's when we started sort of discussing. And I remember you telling me about Ðream-A-Dream and how you were doing banking at the time. And I think I may have even asked you, like, but why are you doing banking then? Why don't you do Ðream-A-Dream? Like, you already created something that's amazing. I don't know if you recall that
I
conversation or
recall it
not.
very well because it was one of the conversations that then made me think about what do I want to do with my life.
It's important to think through this, just because I think at times people see us or others and think, oh, but they've been doing this for so long. But we all started again at a very early age. We all had to probably challenge a lot of the social norms, our family, other things. If you can maybe share a little bit about what those experiences were like.
Having grown up in Bangalore, we lived in the old city of Bangalore, and it was a relatively poor neighborhood. But we were one of the few families that had a concrete home. But most of the homes around us were shanties. But in Mumbai, the inequities is very, very stark. You cannot miss the poverty around you. It's very, very visible. So that hit me that how can there be so much visible poverty in our country? What struck me even more was how easily I got used to it. That within a couple of months, I could just wear blinders and go through life without looking at it anymore. It could very easily become invisible, and I didn't want that to happen. And I had two choices. One was that I continue working, building a career, build some financial security for myself and my family. We didn't come from even a middle class background. Both my parents had almost 3 to 4 jobs so that we could all go to a good school. Uh, or should I do this right away, make my mistakes, learn along the way, and hopefully find some solutions? So I decided to move in full time. That's when I quit my job, came back to Bangalore. January 2002, I came back to Bangalore. My parents didn't understand it at all.
Hmm.
I remember my mother telling me that no one will give you a girl to marry if you do this. So those were the early experiences. My parents did not understand. No, I was a topper in school, topper in university. I was going on building my career in investment banking. Why did I have to leave that and do this? I had to lie quite a bit. I kept telling them, "Give me a year. Let me set this organization up. Then I'll go do my masters and go back to the corporate sector." That 1 year became 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. My father was really upset with me, and he didn't speak to me for 6 years. I lost friends because all my friends were building careers, and as would any young person who's now learning to make money, they wanted to spend their weekends going out, catching a movie. I couldn't afford that. No, I came back to a 3,000 rupees salary. So then I had to find new friendships. So it was not an easy journey. I hadn't prepared myself to these changes. I was just thinking about the work with children. And I'm glad that that's what kept me inspired and committed and grounded because that's what I love. 7 days a week, being with children, building the program is what kept me grounded.
And if you can talk a little bit about, then who did you find to marry? Because that was clearly a stress point in your parents' life.
Well, my parents had given up on me.
so, so have mine, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that happened much, much later. So Suchetha came in, Suchetha, my wife, and
Yes.
currently the CEO at Ðream-A-Dream. She started volunteering at Ðream-A-Dream around 2007. And there's a funny story where she remembers it, but I don't remember it. We were a relatively small organization still, and we were strongly volunteer driven. So I used to run volunteer orientations in a public park here called the Cubbon Park. So it was one of these volunteer orientations, about 15, 20 volunteers had come, and she was one of them. Um, and she remembers me very, very clearly, but I don't remember her at all. And something she said much later after we got married, that she knew that in that moment, Ðream-A-Dream and I am going to play a very important role in her life. She didn't know how, and I, of course, didn't know at all. So she volunteered, and she became one of the most active volunteers in the organization. We also remember exchanging emails with each other. Then in 2010 or late 2009, she reached out to me saying, she's looking to make a shift in career into the social sector, and she wanted advice. So that was the time we started meeting. At least once a week, we would meet for coffee. She'll be driving back from work, and she'll reach out saying, "Hey, I'm passing by the office. Can we catch up?" What I didn't realize then, that those coffee meetings where she was interviewing me, whether me and Ðream-A-Dream are worthy enough for her to take a shift. And she had, in the meanwhile, also finished her course in psychology, and she wanted to become a counselor and psychologist. But I said, while you're still figuring out that piece, why don't you join Ðream-A-Dream? We need people, and why don't you come in? And she came in, and it was really like a house on fire. There was amazing chemistry right from the beginning. She was very, very driven into the work. She understood the work with young people. I needed someone I could sound off ideas with. So it became a great partnership. Everyone around the team started seeing this chemistry except us. And finally, we had a friend of ours from Canada who comes in to train us every year. And she was there at that time. And she was staying with Suchetha. One fine day, she was like, everyone in the office believes there's something going on between both of you. If there is, I think you need to come clean. If there's nothing happening, you better see there's something happening. So that was the first time we actually acknowledged that, okay, maybe there's something here. So we started dating, and 2013 we were married, much to much surprise of my parents.
No, that's excellent. And at that time, how sort of what was in 2010, 11, sort of what was the size of Ðream-A-Dream? What were you doing? I just realized the listeners probably don't even know, many of them, what the organization does.
So Ðream-A-Dream started off working with children and young people coming from vulnerable backgrounds. Initially, it was in care homes, and then in 2006 we moved into schools. And the idea was to use a variety of mediums to develop life skills. So using sport, play, art, drama, music, poetry, travel, various kinds of mediums which we believed are intrinsically rich in creating transformative experiences for children. And we defined a transformative experience as something that fundamentally shifts something inside of you. It could shift the way you look at yourself, your identity. It could shift the way you look at your own belief systems, your values. It could also shift the way you show up in the world.
ನಾನು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಫುಟ್ಬಾಲ್ಗೆ ಹೋದಾಗ ನಾನು ಗೆಲ್ತೀನ ಗೆಲ್ಲಲ್ವಾ ಅಕ್ಕ ನನಗೇನಾದರೂ ಬೈತಾರಂತ ಫುಲ್ ಭಯ ಆಗ್ತಿತ್ತಕ್ಕ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಅಣ್ಣ ರಗ್ಬಿ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಡುವಾಗ, ನೀನು ಹಿಂಗೆ ಆಡು, ನಿನ್ಗೆ ಭಯ ಪಡಬೇಡ, ನಿನ್ನ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ನಿನ್ನ ಹತ್ರ ಇರ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ, ನಿನಗೆ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೂ ನಿನ್ನ ಧೈರ್ಯ ತೊಗೊಂಡು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಿನ್ನ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಹೇಗೆ ಆಡ್ತಾರೆ ಆಗ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ನೀನು ಆಡು ಅಂದರು. ಅವಾಗ ಯಾಕೆ ನಾನು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಗೆದ್ದಿದ್ದು.
So for a kid, for example, who's growing up with the messaging in their community from their family that you're useless, you're good for nothing, you'll never do anything good in life, to suddenly shift their sense of identity to, I have potential, I know who I am, and I'm good the way I am. Or for a kid who grows up believing they're not creative at all, and suddenly start believing they're creative. Those transformative experiences, we believe, came when they got consistent exposure to experiences of play and art.
ಫುಟ್ಬಾಲ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಮ್ಮದು ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ 2 ಅವರ್ಸ್ ಸೆಷನ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. 2 ಅವರ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಚೆಕ್-ಇನ್ ಕ್ವೆಶನ್ನು. ಚೆಕ್-ಇನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಈಗ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗಿಂದ ಈವ್ನಿಂಗ್ವರೆಗೂ ಸ್ಕೂಲಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಬಂದಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮಿಗೆ ಬಂದಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಅವರ ಮೂಡ್ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಇದೆ, ಅದನ್ನು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಕ್ಕೆ ಚೆಕ್ ಇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ವಾರ್ಮ್ ಅಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದು ಎನರ್ಜೈಸರ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಇಲ್ಲ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ಮೇಯ್ನ್ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ, ಒಂದೊಂದು ದಿನ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಷನ್ನ ನಾವು ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರೆ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಷನ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಲೈಕ್ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಬಾಲ್, ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಬಾಲಲ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಷನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಅನ್ನೋದೊಂದು ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು 20 to 25 ಮಿನಿಟ್ಸು ಫುಟ್ಬಾಲ್. ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ರಿಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ರಿಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಸರ್ಕಲಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇಸಿಕ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಕ್ವೆಶನ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ರಿಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗೋದು. ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ ಹೇಗಿತ್ತು, ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿಯಿಂದ ಏನು ಕಲ್ತ್ರಿ, ಇದನ್ನು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಲೈಫ್ಗೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀರಾ, ಈ ಥರ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಎವ್ರಿ ಡೇ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಮೇಲೆ ನಾವು ಡ್ರೀಮ್-A-Dreamಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ನರ್ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ.
So in 2010, we had formalized a life skills curriculum. We were working with about 3,000 kids a year. We had worked with about 10,000 kids across those 10 years. We formalized the organization's curriculum, assessment systems. So it was a full-fledged, now a professional organization. We were a team of about 23 people full-time and about 30 odd part-time facilitators who came from the communities where the kids were. So we used to run these weekly life skills programs as an after-school program, partnering with about 25-30 schools across Bangalore. In addition to that, we had set up a youth center, which was to help kids who were 14-15 years old, but needed continued input of life skills till they reach adulthood. So we realized that because school kind of ends at 15-16, they needed a transition space. So the youth center was set up, where we were helping them again continue to develop life skills, which help them transition into adulthood with the skills that they need to build careers and a better life for themselves. A big part of our question around that time was around the definition of success itself. We realized that when we were working with kids coming from vulnerable backgrounds, having a linear, singular definition of success, which is to finish school, go to college, finish college, get a job, or start something on your own, is not going to work. It probably works only for 10% of the kids. Because otherwise, kids were growing up feeling they're failures, feeling that they've been left behind and they can never do anything with their lives. We need to change that. So we had started opening up the idea of success to definitely financial security is important. In addition to that, do you have access to, say, a home? Do you have access to public services to get to a job or get to a place of study? Do you have access to services that you deserve as a citizen? So access to water, electricity, a clean road. Do you have access to being an active citizen? Do you have access to giving back to your community? Do you have access to support systems that you can reach out to when you're struggling, if you have an emergency or a crisis? Do you have access to friends around you? And we realized many of the young people, for them, these were more important than financial security. And when they got access to this, they did feel like they were on a path to success. So Ðream-A-Dream had reached that level of, I would say, a milestone point in 2010. We had also finished 10 years. So we were asking questions around what the next 10 years look like. And this is what we were learning from the young people.
No, I think it's, I mean, and you've said it so beautifully in terms of many times when, at least when I'm speaking to funders, and this is not just true for India, but Asia, I would say, most funders want to invest first and foremost in education because they feel there's a direct link between the education they received and their ability to generate wealth, which again is understandable. I think the conversations, though, that we have with some of these funders, with most of them, in fact, I would say, similar to what you've just talked about, which is you, myself, others, we're able to access education because everything you just spoke about, all of these other aspects, whether it's health, sanitation, housing, a community, rights, etc., all of that was sort of taken care of for us, which allowed us to access education and take that linear path, as you said, whether it's college or entrepreneurship, etc. I think what people don't realize is many youth and children, not just in India, but perhaps even globally from vulnerable communities, there are other aspects of sort of leveling the playing field that enables education to be accessed effectively. And as a funder, if you just focus on that linear route, and there's nothing wrong with that, but then you're just supporting sort of 10% of the population. And when you start I think overlaying that with, again, like you were just saying earlier about the privileges of even caste and being part of the majority and all of the, when you overlay that too, you realize it's actually far more simpler for majority of the wealth creators, that everything sort of worked to their advantage. And I think supporting, therefore, whether it's life skills, whether it's these other aspects, are so important, because again, many people are like, oh, but if I just ensure they get better grades in school in chemistry and in physics and in math, that will solve everything, not realizing that half the time they may not even have water. And even before, I would say in Mumbai, at least, again, through, experiences with community outreach program, Magic Bus, etc., there were many times children would have to miss school because the water tank would come late, and if they didn't fill up the water, then there'd be no water in the house. And so I feel it must have been challenging, though, for you all to convince donors, then, and to a certain extent now with CSR, on how come what you're talking about, which is sort of could be considered these ancillaries, how come they're critical, and how come that's part of education even?
Yeah. It was very difficult. In fact, I remember in the early years talking to one of the donors from a company uh, about supporting a life skills program. And he said, I don't send my kids to a sports program, and you expect me to pay for poor kids going to a sports program. But what you should be doing is giving them extra classes, tuitions, so they do better in school. So we had to deal with a lot of, I would say, preconceived notions and prejudices. And so we had to understand the link between life skills and better life outcomes, life skills and its role in education. You know now that you understand that when we're working to solve some of these complex challenges, they're really like layers of an onion. Every time you peel a layer, there's another layer that emerges. And what we learned in those first 10 years is the concept of adverse childhood experiences. That in the first 10 years of life, if children experience adversities, which could be lack of food and nutrition, which could be neglect, lack of emotional care, in some cases, exposure to abuse and violence, displacement, extreme poverty, or even warlike situations, any and all of these combinations of adversities impact children's ability to achieve developmental milestones. And there's a lot of research now in neurosciences that tells us the connection between brain development and how children show up in learning. Imagine a scenario, I'm sure you've been to care homes and orphanages. When we used to go into care homes as volunteers, and children had been told a bunch of people are coming to take you out. As soon as we entered the care home, these children, dressed in the best clothes they have, they'll come running up to you, they'll hug you, they'll touch you, they'll climb on you, and they'll ask you who you are, what's your name, and where you're going to take us. And we come away feeling great, right? These children are so loving and friendly, and we had such a great time. But imagine if I ever came to your house for the first time as a stranger, and if you had a 10-year-old at home, would that 10-year-old come running up to me and hug me? They won't. They'll actually hide behind you. They'll peek out, look at me very judgingly, and only when they get an indication from you that you can come forward and say hello, they say a quick hello and run away. Now that's healthy behavior. That's how you expect all children to behave at a certain age, to learn to have boundaries with strangers. But children in a care home, because they're so starved of care and emotional love, they don't have those boundaries. And what ends up happening is they have confused relationships. If that's not addressed, then imagine at the age of 16, 18, when they go out into the world, in many cases, they end up being in abusive domestic violence relationships. So the vicious cycle continues. Same thing with, say, a simple thing like language development. Today, if you ask me to pick up a new language, I will struggle. But at the age of 3 and 4, even if you introduce 5 new languages to a child, the child will pick it up. Because the brain is wired to pick up new languages, build associations, build emotions around language. So there are sensitive periods when development happens. And this is true for any child anywhere in the world from any background. If because of an adversity, you miss the sensitive period when you're supposed to hit a developmental milestone, that's called delayed development, or in many cases, damaged development. And if that is not reversed, then it continues that way. So the child then grows up with many of these challenges. Another example is when you have young people at the age of 18, 19 who go in for interviews. They go in for an interview, they get the job, they do great in the first week of the job. Second week, they disappear. Why? The judgment we make is these kids are not interested, they're not committed, they're not focused, they're not disciplined. What we don't know what's happened. What's possibly happened is there's too much complexity in the job. They've had a development collapse. There's been a trigger in the job environment. They've had a development collapse. They didn't know how to deal with it, so they've run away or they've disappeared. Or maybe there's been an emergency in their family and they don't know how to communicate that emergency now in the job market with their boss, with their manager. So they disappear. Maybe they needed to take leave for something. They didn't know how to ask for permission, so they disappear. And these are all real examples that have happened with young people. So what we realized is that children who grow up with adverse childhood experiences results in stunting or failure to thrive. The failure to thrive is the biggest challenge that children are facing. Life skills is a very good avenue to help children overcome this failure to thrive and catch up to development milestones. So if you look at some of the best programs that NGOs are running for children, there are 3 or 4 core principles. One, they're creating transformative experiences for the children. Second, they're creating safe environments for learning. Third, there is a caring, non-judgmental adult in the relationship, whom the children can learn to trust. And fourth, these transformative experiences are shifting children's ability to think about themselves, or how they look at themselves. A combination of these 4 is where you see big successes happening in most programs, whether it's an Akanksha program or a Teach for India program or a Magic Bus program or a Ðream-A-Dream program. So it's not just purely life skills. Right? It could be anything that you do, but if you do it within these 4 principles, it will work. Schools don't do that. Right? Schools is a one-size-fits-all linear industrial assembly line. Teachers are not trained to pick up adversities of children, the impact of adversities on children. Teachers are not geared up to create environments of safety. Of course, the best teachers do it. Even in some of the best, most difficult government school environments, if you have a best teacher who's deeply empathetic, they will do it. But as a system, they're not geared to design this. So children who grow up in adversity, enter the school environment, they do not get the interventions that are needed to overcome adversity, to catch up to development milestones. So then they start falling off the cracks. That is why you see only 30% of the kids finishing 10th grade and less than that going into college. It's because we missed this layer of understanding the impact of adversity. And that's how we started designing our program.
ಡ್ರೀಮ್ ಇಂಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಏನು ಅಂತ ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆದಾಗ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನನಗೆ ಡ್ರೀಮ್ ಇಂಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅದರಿಂದ ನನ್ನ ಲೈಫ್ ತುಂಬ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಯಿತು. ಕಾನ್ಫಿಡೆನ್ಸ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಆಯಿತು. ತುಂಬ ಇವನ್ ಸೊಸೈಟಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಬರೀ ಗಂಡು ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಮಾತ್ರ, ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳು ಆಡೋ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಅದನ್ನೇ ನಾನು ಚಾಲೆಂಜಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ತೊಗೊಂಡು ಫುಟ್ಬಾಲ್ನ ನಾನು ಪ್ಯಾಷನ್ ಆಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಈಗ ಮುಂಬೈಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಂಗ್ ಲೀಡರ್ ಆಗಿ ಬಂದೆ. ದೆನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಆಯಿತು ನನಗೆ. ಸೊ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟು ಪಂಜಾಬ್ಗೆ ನಮ್ಮದೇ ಒಂದು ಟೀಮ್ ರೆಡಿ ಮಾಡಿ ನಾನು ಪಂಜಾಬ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದೆ. ಬಟ್ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಆಯ್ತು ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ.
Last week I was very, very lucky and privileged to be speaking at a conference that the Oscar Foundation put on. And Oscar Foundation is run and was started out by Ashoka. Ashok, at the age of 13 or 14, joined the Magic Bus program. He ended up becoming a youth mentor there, and then started his own organization, the Oscar Foundation. And last Monday, in fact, in Mumbai, Oscar Foundation had brought together a number of NGOs that uses sport as a tool to engage children, to provide these life skills and these components you just spoke about, which again, unfortunately, many times are not as critical in judging whether a school is successful or not. There were multiple organizations there. Kalyani, for example, was there from previously known as Nas Foundation, in terms of their great work in Nepal. Abhijit was there from Slum Soccer, and lots of groups were there. But I think, to your point, they each of these groups bring those other four elements, right? There's a mentor in the community, just like Ashok was and continues to be, who's that trusted adult. There's a sense of community beyond just education, yet they all work quite closely with the school, but their programs are very much outside of the school. In fact, one of the organizations, and I forgot their name, but they had done some really good work in Orissa, and they were just saying they're even speaking to teachers of why the physical education program was required during exams was so difficult. So even in our school system, we have these programs, but even the physical education teachers themselves are saying, no, it's exam time. We cannot have them, go out and play or be themselves or get their energy sort of from that. And so I think what's unique again of so many great organizations that focus on life skills is, to a certain extent, they have to do it outside of school. And while there is some level of course, partnership with the school, these are programs and potentially funds that the government will never actually have access to. And again, I think in a lot of our life sort of journeys when we were youth, to your point, perhaps we were very, very fortunate that we weren't stunted, and even if we were, we again had sort of this community, right? We had people, we had mentors, we had individuals that may have not been marked out as mentors, but we had a lot of that. And again, I go back to donors because one of the things I think is important for donors to realize also these complexities. And I think you may have been a little bit more generous in terms of probably less than 5% of our population from certain vulnerable backgrounds actually can not just get the college degree, but get the college degree with the sustainable job. And I think donors need to realize that, therefore, you're letting go of 95% of kids with this view of, oh, but we're holding NGOs accountable. And you're like, no, you're actually already talking about the cream of the crop, so to speak. And if anything, you're doing a disjustice for why civil society is even required.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
And
Couldn't have said it better.
CSR, unfortunately, I feel and the rules that govern that, which get more and more complex, are huge culprits of this. And I think a lot of it is because one assumes your lived experiences are exactly the same as somebody else's. And again, I don't think I'm at all saying education is not important, but you have to do holistic sort of growth of a child, especially an adolescent, given everything that's going after them. And just focusing on science and math is not the answer if you don't have this support system in place. So you've been running with your wife, Ðream-A-Dream. You've been very active in the sector. But I think your journey, as it relates to a certain extent to your own mental well-being and health, you decided to sort of focus slightly different. And if you can maybe speak about that, that would be great.
Wow. So where do I start? So I've been in the social sector now for about 25 years. This has been my life. I started at 21 and I've been in this space for 25 years. And I was one of those people who would look forward to a Monday morning because I used to love what I'm doing. And the first 10 years, I worked with kids directly a lot. And what I didn't realize is that the amount of time I was spending with the kids and the young people, I took on a lot of that trauma that they were experiencing in their life. And I didn't necessarily find a way to release that through any kind of practice or a intentional process. So that stayed with me. And by about 2009, I had an episode of burnout. It was, I remember very clearly, I got ready to go to work, and the first time the thought came into me, I didn't want to go to work. And I was shocked by that thought. And I got very scared. So I just grabbed some clothes, told my parents I'm going to a conference, just called the office and saying I'm going away for a week or so. got onto the first bus that was getting out of Bangalore bus station, landed up in Madikeri and checked into a homestay. Put off my laptop, put off my phone, and slept for a week. And I didn't realize how tired I was. I was just extremely tired, exhausted. So I just slept for a whole week. So that took me into a self-reflection journey. And I realized that I joined Ðream-A-Dream actually because I wanted to be with children and work with children and be in those environments. I didn't have the skills to build an organization. And organization building became a painful process for me. And I wasn't very good at it. I was what I call a reluctant leader. I hadn't clarified my leadership style, which meant that the team that I had built, the culture I had built, it was a very confused culture. At some levels, it was very high levels of micromanagement. And other levels, it was like, if I can figure things out, you can figure things out too. So go figure it out. So the teams are always very confused about how they need to show up. And that meant that I was taking on every single burden of running the organization, including, I remember, I used to do bookkeeping for the organization because I did not trust the person who we had as an accountant to do good bookkeeping. Just around the time also we lost 50% of our team. Most of them because they were unhappy with me and disgruntled with me. But I didn't know what it was that I was doing wrong. It took me a few years to realize that it was because I didn't know how to build an organization and nurture a team and empower a team. Suchetha is naturally good at it. So we redesigned culture, almost restarted the organization, built in new value systems, built in new systems and processes. Today we have something called a people philosophy, which kind of lays the foundation of our work. So around that time, I had realized that I need to start stepping back, but the organization wasn't stable enough to do that. We even shifted our board, and the board gave me feedback saying, you need to now for a few years have CEO energy, which is an energy of consolidation, building the team, systems and processes, not an entrepreneurial energy, which was natural for me to go out and try things and build opportunities. So then Suchetha took on as the CEO. And so she's basically insulated the team from me. She said, I will translate your vision to the team at the place they're at. And I'll invest in the culture building and the value building. Our attritions used to be over 50% every year before 2011. Now they are less than 10%, have been less than 10% for 10 years now. So it's a big shift. So the organization actually survived and then started thriving again. But I continued to struggle as an individual. 2013 is the first known memory I have of going into depression. Days on end when I didn't want to go to work, I just wanted to sit at home and sleep or just vegetate, watch television. But I had to run the organization too. So it was this very, very difficult time. Suchetha saw it, that this was clearly a case of a mental health problem. I was not ready to acknowledge it. So I was like, it's a phase, it'll go away, right? And of course, there were phases when I was high energy. Because the other thing I learned over the period of therapy and everything is that I'm a functional depressive person. So I can also function very effectively while being depressed. The Nirbhaya case was really what broke the camel's back, because that put a huge self-doubt in me about our work itself. Because the people who committed that crime, I kept thinking that at some point they were kids. And at some point something happened in their life that they became who they became. And why were we not there as a society to support them, to give them love and care and respect and dignity so they wouldn't grow up to become who they became? So I took that on very, very personally. So I lived with it till about 2016 when I fell ill. I had a crazy stomach infection and I was ill for a whole year. I couldn't keep any food inside of me. My gut had given up. All kinds of new health complications started. And that's when we kind of decided we have to have a leadership transition. That was the time I realized that this is my body now telling me I'm giving up on you. You're not listening to me anymore. and I'm giving up on you unless you choose to now start working on yourself. So that's the first time I started seeing a therapist. I went to a psychiatrist, got into medications, got into a whole therapy process. Got better. The transition happened. The board gave me a free hand saying, go discover a new role for yourself. See what you want to do. And I found a beautiful new role for myself, which is to move from an organization agenda to a cause agenda, to start now becoming the voice of young people. And I found the outlet of that in working with international organizations. So being the voice of young people from adversity in India, in spaces like the UN and OECD and all the other international bilateral, multilateral organizations, loved the role, which meant I started traveling intensively. I was traveling 20 days a month. So what I had again skipped is that my body needed time to heal. Body needed rest. But I got excited about this whole new challenge, whole new role, and I went after it. When the lockdown happened, COVID was very difficult. I had a beautiful home that I could stay in, but there was tremendous guilt that I couldn't be out there. And my team was out there. The entire team was out there doing COVID relief, COVID support to the young people and their families. But the team was like, you're not coming on the ground because you've just recovered from this illness. We're not going to get you on the ground. So I was feeling extremely guilty. Went back into depression. And this time it was even more severe. As soon as COVID got over, I started traveling again. And I remember doing these 3 international trips and 1 trip to Nagaland in a span of 3 months. All those trips I was ill. And I finished my Nagaland trip in June 2022. I came home and I had a nervous breakdown. I just crashed. My body just crashed. It was so severe that I couldn't step out of the house. If I opened the main door, I would get scared. My whole body would start palpitating, shivering. And it was a whole new experience for me. I've never experienced anxiety like this. So for 2 months, I stayed put at home. I couldn't go visit my parents. It was just too scary to step out. So that's when it hit me that, I'm not dealing with this right. I'm just finding band-aid solutions. And took a step back and realized, I'm 45. I have another 25, 30 years of work, and I want to be able to do this work. If I do it like this, it's clearly a case where I'm going to kill myself. If I have to be healthy and well to do this work and be even authentic to the young people, because we're asking young people to have good lives, good, healthy lives. I cannot be truthful to that idea if I'm not doing that for myself. That started a whole new journey of investing in my mental well-being. So therapy, to art practices, to mindfulness practices, to physical health. I won't say I'm doing very good with it, but I'm recognizing that's what is important now, and I reduced a lot of my work. But it was also around that time, through COVID and post-COVID, I was connecting with a lot of social entrepreneurs, social sector leaders. And the common trend was this sense of exhaustion, burnout. Not necessarily because they'd been working for 20, 25 years. It was also because, one, COVID was a big turning point for many people. It almost pushed back a lot of gains we had to many years back. It was also because of what was happening around the world with high levels of polarization. Also because we had so much more exposure to bad news. It was easy to get bad news. Earlier, it was not that easy. You got it through the news channels. Now with social media, you could have access to bad news all the time. And everyone is seeking help. Everyone is seeking support. So it's too overwhelming. So social sector leaders I was speaking to were also going through this self-doubt, identity crisis, imposter syndrome. Like something is becoming systemically wrong now. This is not just my problem anymore. It's a systemic challenge that seeping into the sector. That led to me talking to Donald Lobo from Chintu Gudia Foundation. It was actually in 2022 I spoke to him about it. I said, I think we need to do something to support social sector leaders to be in this for the long run. If we start losing social sector leaders to burnout and exhaustion and to becoming critical of this work, then who will do the work, right? We need this team. he was amazing. He was generous. He said, if you want to start something, I will back it completely. So come up with it and let's start it. It took me a year before I could work through my own issues. And then finally, last November, we started the Cocoon initiative. And Dasra, of course, you came in to support it. You said, we'll handle all the back end. Donald Lobo, of course, has put in the money. And we launched it on November 13th. And in less than 3 months, we had 40 applications. And we didn't do any marketing other than putting it out in the Dasra newsletter.
And then Smaranita, I believe,
supported in Idea,
well.
right? Other than that, we didn't do anything. There are 40 applications, and every single application is primed to get this kind of support for a variety of reasons, from Bilaspur to rural Chhattisgarh to Madurai to rural West Bengal to urban Mumbai. Social sector leaders across the board coming in with this sense of, I'm exhausted. People who have worked for 10 years to people who have worked for 40 years in the sector. So, yeah, I think we've caught on to a systemic challenge in the sector that needs to be addressed.
In the last 2-3 years, at least, these conversations are happening now. I know with one of the initiatives that we support at Dasra called the Rebuild India Fund, where we're supporting now 142 grassroots leaders from around the country doing amazing work. We partnered with the Intention Collective, something that Suparna Gupta from Ungin started out, which is supporting frontline workers with sort of their mental well-being. And I think the Cancun initiative allows leaders, and please correct me if I'm getting this incorrect, but allows leaders to apply for a grant, which allows them just to take a sabbatical. And they can do whatever they want in that sabbatical. Because again, we all heal differently. And I think what Cocoon Initiative is doing is phenomenal in terms of, number one, allowing us to be human and saying, look, it's okay. Yeah. And 40 applications. That is phenomenal. And I guess as you have spoken to some of the applicants or even organizations, what are some of the things you're hearing early on?
So two things are becoming very clear. One is there's a clear need. There's a clear need among social sector leaders to have some kind of support system with their mental health, well-being. Second, for a lot of social sector leaders, it's a new idea. They're like, what, you're going to give me money to do nothing? Literally, I don't have to do a project.
Yeah, I don't have to have a results framework
on
what are the exactly. 3 metrics.
Right. And, that I don't have to do a learning, do I have to sign up for a course or something? Nothing. Right? So it's a new idea, of course. And the financial aspect is extremely critical. A lot of social sector leaders are not able to take these sabbaticals even when they realize they need it, because the salary that they get, the honorarium that they get from the organizations is the only thing that's probably supporting them and their families. And if that goes away even for a few months, it becomes very challenging for them. I had this very senior gentleman from the social sector, been in the sector for over 40 years, asking me during a conversation that, is it okay if I take my wife on a holiday? I've never taken her on a holiday. It's like, yeah, absolutely. If that's what nurtures you and your family and helps you reconnect with your family. Another gentleman sharing that, he's never spent time with his kids because he's been working. So is it okay if I, stay at home and spend time with my kids and they're going to go off to college soon? It's like, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm hoping you will do, right? Another lady who's just recovered from a life-threatening disease. And she said, within 1 week of coming out of the hospital, I was back at work because someone had to get back to work and do the work. But my body is still weak and I have not had a chance to rest and recover. So can I use this to just rest and recover? So yeah, absolutely, right? So you do realize that there's a lot of there's this sense of deep personal sacrifice, which leaders are happy to do, but it's at deep personal cost to their health. So as I'm spending time in these conversations, and these are not interviews, right? I always tell them it's just a conversation. We are here to support you. The only thing we want to make sure is that you have some kind of stability in the organization, that you don't get pulled back if something happens, or we'll help you build that stability. And then you take the sabbatical. But it's important that when you take the sabbatical, you're completely cut off from the organization, because even just one meeting, one phone call shifts your mind back to work. So that's been the only criteria. Otherwise, we want to support every individual that kind of applies through this initiative. In many of these conversations, what is becoming very, very clear is that they want to continue to do this work. They want to continue to create change in their communities, in their circles, in the larger nation, whatever the scope of influence. But this potential break is needed to just rejuvenate, to just take that pause, to also just celebrate the journeys they've had, right? They've not even taken the pause to celebrate the life that they've had, the amazing changes they have created. And that has been very heartening to help people realize that.
No, it's amazing. And I hope that from this, we're able to convince clearly boards and funders that this some level of enabling people to focus on themselves need to be part and parcel of every grant they make. Because if you're not focusing again on the well-being, then you're actually, I mean, like you were saying, through your personal stories, and thank you so much for sharing, but you're then doing it just disjustice for the communities you're serving if you're not 100% there. And you may think that no, but I have to be there every single day, and if I miss a week, a month, or even 6 months or 3 months or whatever, it's not going to help. But I think all of us who have the ability to go on vacation, we come back better. We come back more refreshed, and so hopefully this will create a sort of movement of sorts, which becomes the norm.
This thing that I read a few years back, that when farmers farm on their land, they put a crop every year for 5 years. And then in the 6th year, they don't put a crop, they don't grow anything. They leave the land as it is. And they say that is the most important year, because that's the year the soil rejuvenates. The worms come back and everything else gets refreshed and the ground gets ready for another 5 years of work. If you don't do that, then the ground will become barren in 10 years and you lose the ground. So these periods of pause are so critical in human life, and it brings the whole group field in a whole different direction, calms the whole field down. It centers that, it brings focus. So it's really about shifting that these pauses in the lives of organizations, in the lives of leaders, in the lives of frontline workers could actually be the best thing we can offer. And this is our way of now nurturing the sector, right? And giving the sector what it needs in terms of its pause.
No, absolutely amazing. Well, thank you, Vishal, for coming here today, for sharing your stories and doing all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and for being such a great friend for 25 years.
Absolutely. It's been beautiful. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about our work of any of the guests, or the Rebuild India Fund, please go to our website, dasra.org/NCE, where we've got show notes, links, and much, much more. No Cost Extension is produced by the amazing Vaca Media.